when we got this assignment, we knew that we were messing with the holy grail of motorcycles, commented Brian Nelson, lead stylist on Product Rushmore, who later explained that his goal was to make a lasting design that's neither trendy nor trying to make a fashion statement. Has Harley succeeded? Only time will tell. Well, the time has told. And hey guys, this is Dan with Gears and Gadgets. Thanks for tuning in. Today, I don't think I'm going to make a whole lot of friends, and that's okay. A week ago, I posted a video with what I think the Harley-Davidson should be doing with the 2020 Street Glide. I have no idea if they're actually going to make changes to the touring bikes or not. There's a lot of speculation that they may, but either way, I wanted to put out my version of a concept that I thought was something that maybe would ring to the millennials and drop the average age of a Harley buyer from maybe 50 down to maybe 30. So that was the intent of my video. And for the most part, it's been received very well. In the matter of a week, it's received 26,000 views. And overall, the comments have been pretty decent. But I do have some that I would like to share with you before I get into really the reason why I'm going to tell you that millennials aren't the reason why Harley-Davidson is dying. But you cannot convince these guys otherwise. To the fact that I called the street glides and touring bikes long in the tooth, you're definitely a millennial. Long in the tooth. Are you crazy? This stupid soy boy millennials destroying motorcycling. I'd rather see Harley-Davidson disappear than be pussified for soy boys. The same guy had to tell him that I had to approve his message out of my spam folder in his, you would think that might be something somebody would say, wow, my stuff is getting picked up as spam, but just continues on that the millennials are, need to learn to appreciate a good thing. And I'm sorry to tell you, but you're wrong. It's just facts don't match up with the fact that pussy millennials are killing off Harley-Davidson. It's actually your generation, Generation X, is the reason why Harley-Davidson sales are slipping. We're at the point where Harley-Davidson's typical customers, in 1999, the average rider was 43 years old. In 2004, the average rider was 46 years old. And in 2008, the average rider was 48 years old. So fast forward 10 more years from now, it's reasonable to assume that the average buyer is 50 years old. So to put this into perspective, my YouTube channel, which I've been at for about 3.5 years now, has over 2.5 million views. The average viewer on my channel in that time frame was 30 years old. When I posted this video, which has now 26,000 views, on this video alone, the average viewer is, wait for it, 50 years old. So that puts it right back in line with my assumption that your average Harley buyer is probably 50 years old. So that just puts it back into, it's the Generation X, or a lot of people don't even recognize Generation X as being a real thing. So they kind of go from baby boomers straight to millennials. But even if you do that and you just split Generation X in half, it still falls in the baby boomer category of the age range of what a 50-year-old is. So I thought, with this thought process, what are Harley's sales numbers? So I just went and picked up from 2002 to 2019, and I averaged out the sales of Harley-Davidson on a yearly basis. So I came up with that average number. That was just over 272,000 bikes annually that Harley-Davidson sells. So then I just took those years and said, well, what years have they beat their own average? Well, since 2008, Harley-Davidson has not beat their own average of 2002 to 2018. That's telling me that you guys, the Generation Xers out there, actually gave up on Harley-Davidson before you even passed the torch to the millennials. You think of a relay race, and the one guy's running the first leg of the race, halfway through his leg, falls flat on his face, and then gets up and starts screaming at the guy ahead of him that he never even got to the chance to hand the baton to, that he's the reason why they lost the race. It just doesn't make any sense. The argument's it's just flawed. Now, some people out there are just going to say that, well, maybe motorcycling is just dying. It's just something that's not something the millennials want to do. It's not really a growing segment. Well, that's also wrong. In that same time frame that I used of 2002 to 2019, motorcycles actually went from being 2.1% of the vehicles on the road in the U.S. to 3.2% of vehicles on the road in the U.S. And registrations in the same time period of motorcycles on the road increased by almost 1 million motorcycles. So the sales of Harley-Davidson are just kind of staying flatlined. Well, Granted, not a huge upswing of riders in that time frame, still an upswing nonetheless. So that upswing of riders, Harley's not following along with that. And a big part of that, I think, is because they're not building bikes for the younger guys. They're building them for the older guys, and the older guys just aren't buying bikes anymore. I suspect that a lot of those guys in that 50-year-old range, especially from the 2008 to 2012 range, probably took a beating in the economy collapse, lost a lot of retirement, sold their bike, and then once things got better, just never bought another one. And what you have now is a younger generation coming up that doesn't have the same retirement that those guys had. So the baby boomers, basically, they grew up in an era where they were, you leave high school, you get a factory job, you make a living wage, a pretty healthy middle-class type of lifestyle. They could afford motorcycles, and they wanted to buy them because their parents had them, their grandparents of war era had those motorcycles, and they wanted to have them too. So you now have millennials who are further removed away from that heritage of Harley-Davidson and its direct ties to World War II and the guys that fought in Nam, like legit badass guys that were tied to motorcycling and that whole generation. The baby boomers just kind of clamored to that because it's what they saw their parents and grandparents, and it was something that rang true to them. Well, now you have a whole era of millennials coming up who are seeing their parents, if they are riding, maybe they're a lawyer that riding a CVO that's throwing on some leathers on the weekends and going out to ride. Not as much of like the badass thing that they're trying to emulate. And I just don't think the millennials care about all that too much. And one of the arguments that I made was that the touring bikes kind of just look the same. And I still mean that. I think if you look at a Street Glide from the early 90s to now, the only real difference as far as aesthetics go is like the Rushmore. They had an event in there. And a lot of guys that are diehard Harley guys are like, well, that's not true. So many things have changed. I'm talking about to the average non-Harley-Davidson guy, not seeing the perceived value in something new and just not wanting to make that huge expense of $27,000 on a brand new motorcycle when they can look at one that's a few years old and say, yeah, I don't really see a big difference. So in my opinion and in my design of my concept, I feel like Harley-Davidson is building bikes catered to a customer that's kind of abandoning them and also screaming and yelling about the next generation while they're abandoning them. And they're just building bikes catered to that guy. I don't totally understand the thought process that if you don't swing for the fences and you don't make really big advancements and really use what you have as your brand to leverage that and just really go whole hog, pun intended, this is what happens. The brand is really just going down the exact path of what a company who didn't try to make something trendy or make any sort of statements. This is kind of what happens. It's just mediocre sales. So with all that being said, I just wanted to put it out there that it's certainly not the millennials that are hurting Harley-Davidson. It's not helping because the bikes aren't being built to cater to the millennials by no means, but your target people to blame essentially for the state of Harley-Davidson as well, Harley-Davidson themselves, and the people that are born in the 1960 range, 1960 to 70, you're not even into the millennials yet. You haven't gotten there yet. So before you start passing the blame game on to the younger generation, I think it's time that people look inward and start embracing the change that Harley needs to make to maybe drop that average age of a Harley-Davidson buyer from 50 down to 30. Then you can start throwing stones because as of this point, it's really you got to look in the mirror and to say it's my generation, and I mean your generation, that has failed the motor company. And it's of their own doing and the customers who are refusing to accept any sort of change whatsoever. And I think Harley-Davidson kind of caters to that whole core demographic to a fault because I think they're afraid of really taking a massive swing at things. So what are millennials interested in buying with motorcycles? They want tech. They want features. They want lightweight materials. They want something that is cool in a modern engineering sense, not something that is built heavy on nostalgia with a little nod to tech. They want something built heavy on tech and engineering with a little nod to nostalgia. And that's what I'll leave this video on. I just wanted to put this out there because I was blown away by the analytics on my video. It was like, wow, this is really a telling sign of what Harley-Davidson is up against, and I just wanted to share that with my viewers. So thank you very much for tuning in. If this is your first time tuning in, please hit that subscribe button down below. Remember, likes go a long way to help support the channel, and I will see you next time.